The president of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, Jose Manuel Ramos Horta, arrived in Phnom Penh close to 10 a.m. this Wednesday morning, along with an accompanying high-level delegation for a 3-day official state visit to Cambodia. According to a press release issued by the Cambodian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the president of Timor-Leste will pay a state visit to Cambodia at the invitation of His Majesty the King of Cambodia. This afternoon, the president of Timor-Leste will hold a press conference regarding his state visit to Cambodia and what this could mean for the relationship between the two countries.
He was also the first foreign minister of Timor-Leste. Also, his first stage as a prime minister was in 2006, before he became president on his first term, 2007 to 2012, and this year he became in his second term. He's also have got a Nobel laureate to his name. Also, during his time when he wasn't president, he was Under Secretary General Special Rep of Senegal. Also, during 2015, 2016, he was chairman of the High UN Panel Republic and Operations. Welcome to Cambodia. Do you like to make a welcome speech?
Yes, sure. Well, I will be brief, just some introductory remarks. Obviously, speaking in English, but if any questions in French or any other language like Spanish, Portuguese, I'm happy to answer. Feel free, because if there are some correspondents here from other nationalities, feel free to ask questions. And before I begin, let me introduce my colleagues who are here. To my right, the Foreign Minister of Timor-Leste, Don Adalgisa. And next is former Foreign Minister, Dr. Dionisio Babu, and Ambassador Barciano, former ambassador in the European Union, in Brussels, in Geneva, and now in my office in international relations. Mr. Francisco Cavaldi is the president of our National Soccer Federation. And to my left, the ambassador of Timor-Leste in Kingdom of Cambodia, and Ms. Dr. Milena Rangel. She is the head of ASEAN section in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Your Elder Lopez is economics advisor, former deputy minister of finance. And there are other members of the staff who are not here at the moment. I'm very pleased to return to this great country, great kingdom. This is not my first visit. I was here first time in 2000, before Timor-Leste independence. And then I came as foreign minister after independence. And then as president, first time in 2010 or 11. And then I came twice at least as former president for different some academic lectures. So great pleasure, privilege to be here and witnessing every time such a dramatic, positive transformation. We hear all the time about Singapore, economic miracle, about Dubai, or about China. But I think Cambodia is equally impressive, the way it has changed from so much more difficult past, and without really resources, although the country is rich, but it started off on the basis of such tremendous political and human upheaval. So my tribute to the leadership, in particular to Prime Minister Hun Sen, the architect of this great transformation. And Prime Minister Hun Sen has been a great friend of Timor-Leste. We have met many times in the past, not only me, but many other Timorese leaders who have been through Cambodia, been to Cambodia, have met with him. He has great feelings about Timor-Leste because of the history of Cambodia, because of his personal history, because of his experience on pulling a country out of extreme poverty and past tragedy to what it is today. So someone like him has feelings, and feelings of solidarity, of fraternity towards others in difficult situations. And that's my knowledge, understanding of Prime Minister Hun Sen. And of course, His Majesty, King Norodom Sihanouk, whom I met also in the past when I first came here. Great statesman, Norodom Sihanouk. What a man. Musician, filmmaker, storyteller.
Yes, very.
And a wonderful human being. And caught in the upheaval of the Cold War in the 60s and how he managed, that difficult situation. Great tribute to him. In my past visit as president, I met with, again, with the Prime Minister. So, very grateful to Cambodia, to Prime Minister Hun Sen for supporting our aspiration to join ASEAN. We are part of Southeast Asia, so by virtue of geography, we should automatically be eligible. In Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, you are a member of a regional organization by virtue of the fact that you are part of the region. There is not much discussion about that. In Africa, you get automatically admitted, regardless of whether you're prepared or not. In Latin America, the same. You belong to the Organization of American States by virtue of the fact that you are in the Latin America region. Europe, of course, is different. The process is similar to ASEAN accession. It's a very long, sometimes painful, slow process that's necessary. And so joining ASEAN, we went through 10 years of a serious process that our leaders, collectively, everyone in the country, so not only one particular political party, one particular group, everyone view it as a national strategic objective in our national strategic interest to join ASEAN. Towards that end, we worked hard to meet what we would say the benchmarks, 3 pillars in ASEAN, cultural, economic, and peace and security. We have met most of them. A long way to go to be fully in compliance with the economic pillar, but who can say, that country A or B already have reached every possible goal in the economic pillar. The more we progress, the more we want to aim further. So in Timor-Leste, we are just modestly ambitious to reach the level of Cambodia or other ASEAN countries. We have come very fast. I say fast because it's only 10 years since we applied. 20 years since the restoration of independence. In the life of a person, 20 years is very young, is youth. In the life of a country, 20 years is nothing. Countries took many decades to be built to get out of the destructions of war in many decades. Timor-Leste, we come a long way. Economically, we are not doing too bad. We are blessed by some oil and gas. Even more are in the Timor Sea, waiting to be developed, and should happen hopefully in the next few months. We reached an agreement with the developers, the joint venture, and Australia to develop one of the biggest gas fields in Asia, called Greater Sunrise, which would then give us more resources to continue our modernization strategy, building infrastructures, educate our people, improve health care, and at the same time contribute to the well-being of our region. Working with our ASEAN partners and with other neighbors like Australia, New Zealand. Of course, Timor-Leste has very good relationship with Indonesia. There are no two countries in Asia that can claim to have better relations than our two countries, Timor-Leste and Indonesia. We are a great example of reconciliation, of normalization of relations after a conflict. And at the same time, working with our neighbors, learning from our neighbors, ASEAN members, on the road to prosperity. Cambodia and others are a great example of what we can do, what we can achieve to improve the lives of the people. So coming to Cambodia, one is to thank His Majesty, to thank Prime Minister Hun Sen and the whole Cambodian government and the people for supporting us all these years, not only to join ASEAN, but to build our country. Because Prime Minister Hun Sen was one of the few prime ministers of ASEAN countries that took the time to visit us. And during the UN transition Timor-Leste, there were Cambodian officials part of the UN mission in Timor-Leste. Not many, but there were some. And we have already very good relationship, and we hope to move on towards trade, connectivity, hopefully a line link between Timor-Leste and Cambodia. Hopefully investors in Cambodia coming to Timor-Leste in investing in tourism sector, in hotels or industries. I hope our government and the private sector will diversify more our trade relations so that we buy more from Cambodia and we can also sell to Cambodia. We don't have much to sell except oil and gas, except coffee. We have the best coffee in the world. I guarantee you, better than Indonesian coffee, better than Papua New Guinea, better than Colombia, Costa Rica, Ethiopia, Kenya, Jamaica. I know all the coffees in the world. I took our coffee to Rome, to the Vatican, to the Pope. I gave to the Pope our coffee, and the Pope assured me that he drinks Timor coffee every day. I asked him, can I tell people that you drink Timor coffee? Yes, you can tell. So we hope to sell coffee to Cambodia. Thank you.
Actually, to be honest, I've had the privilege last week to try your coffee, and it was very amazing. I'm a big coffee drinker, so it was great. It seems in the last 20 years, a lot's happened for Timor-Leste with the changing and during your time now with the oil and and growing and relationships, like you said, with Cambodia and Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. A lot has happened in the last 20 years, and all for the good.
Yes, we have a very good relationship with all our neighbors, and not only in the region, but with South Korea, Republic of Korea, exceptional good relations with Japan, with China. Also beginning to have more relations with India, but also very strong relationships in Europe. Almost all countries in Europe, we have a very strong relationship with the European Union, and the countries in particular, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Belgium, Germany, Republic of Ireland, UK, France. We have very good relations with all of them. With the United States, as well as with Canada, with Cuba, in Latin America, particularly Brazil, and in Africa also. So we have those small countries, we have very active diplomacy, very active person-to-person relationships.
Excellent. So while you're in Cambodia the next few days, you have a very busy schedule. You're meeting the King, the Prime Minister, Hun Manet. Also, there'll be some important days of signing MOUs, also with the aviation. So your schedule's quite busy in the 4 days. So what do you think about that?
Well, that's what I'm supposed to be, busy. and being busy thanks to our where is he also our ambassador in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. He organized a very good program. Our foreign minister have been here already, I don't know how many times. Three times already.
In Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
Just this year.
This year? Wow. It's a lot this year.
Before that, how many? One time.
This year was.
Yes.
And this one will be before.
4 times. So, and probably Dr. Milena Rangel, how many times he's been here? 4 times, yeah. Dr. Denise Wag, when you have 4 minutes, you came. Okay, so very many things with that. And he's
Cambodian. I'm Cambodian.
Mr. Kawali is very well known in the World Soccer Federation activities.
Yes.
With Timor-Leste, we almost never win any game, but because we always train last minute.
It's the point of at least trying and being there and being part of the team and fun and everything. Correct. So over your time, meeting the Pope, I mean, that would have been a great privilege as well. And also coming to Cambodia, meeting the King, and of course the Prime Minister. And as we know, the last 2 years, unfortunately, with COVID, it's been a tough year for everybody. And I think living through Cambodia during this last couple of years, the Prime Minister Hun Sen has done a lot on get us through COVID. So who's your inspiration? Who's the person that you'd say, well, I was privileged to meet them?
Well, I say a privilege for me to have met King Norodom Sihanouk, and a privilege to meet with Prime Minister Hun Sen. What an extraordinary leader. When you know where he came from in very difficult circumstances. And a bit like me, he was very young when he was foreign minister. He was 28 years old. I was 25 or 26.
Oh, very young.
Yeah. Foreign minister, similarities. But in the region, I met so many leaders. With all the leaders in Southeast Asia, I knew, for instance, in the Philippines, a lot of the Cory Aquino family.
Yep.
I knew Ninoy Aquino when he was in the United States.
Okay.
Before he traveled back to Philippines and then got killed. And I became very good friend with Cory Aquino. I went to her funeral. I was the only leader in Asia, in the world, who went to the funeral. And I went to the only leader in the world who went to the inauguration of Noynoy Aquino.
Oh, yeah.
Ninoy was the father, Noynoy was the son.
Yep.
And the late king of Thailand, I met several times. And the current, no, I haven't met. Mahathir and all other leaders in Malaysia. Been to Laos, been to Vietnam, been to Brunei, know the Sultan. Singapore, way back to Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Chok Tong, current President, Prime Minister Lee, and many foreign ministers of Singapore. In Malaysia, I know a very good friend with Anwar Ibrahim, as well as with all others. And then in Europe, the United States, from Bill Clinton to the only president I probably never met was Donald Trump. And
Okay.
I don't know how the meeting would have happened. What
Well,
would happen
it
if
could
I
be still possible with the elections coming up soon. It looks like he might be running.
I have to say, it's very interesting. Very
He's a character.
Interesting character. You have to give him some credit. You cannot just dismiss the man. But I met Obama, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush. Biden, I met him when he was vice president and was senator, more than once. I knew his son. I had dinner with Biden once in New York with him and his son at the Waldorf Astoria. The son who died, Bo was Attorney General in California, I think. I don't remember where he was senator. And Latin America, Fidel Castro. Met many times with Fidel Castro. I never met with Kim Jong-un. Never been to North Korea. But I know South Korea very well. And many Japanese leaders. The current emperor, I met him when he was crown prince.
Oh, beautiful.
So it has been, I've been busy.
Yeah, quite a long list of things.
Yeah.
So, in going forward with Timor-Leste, what is your dream? What do you hope for yourself and your fellow country people? I mean, you've just said you're hoping to sign with the oil and everything else. But in going forward into growing ASEAN, I'm sure a few of the guys are going to have some questions about that coming up soon, because that's something that you guys are aiming for as well. Besides the ASEAN, what's next? What's going forward?
Joining ASEAN, like joining WTO, is all part of our regional and global economic integration. The world is so interconnected, interdependent, that no country can be a closed island unto itself. We have to develop friendships, partnerships, close cooperation. We have to work towards more stronger multilateral systems. We see from so many examples like COVID, we through international cooperation and institutions like WHO and many others, that maybe not more people died of COVID. The response from the scientific world and the government, in spite of some criticism with the unfair share of the vaccine, I think, in fairness, they did their best, because even a country like the United States, God, they did have a massive number of deaths. And France, they also had massive number of cases. And UK, one of the first world leaders to got very sick with COVID was Prime Minister of United Kingdom, Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson, yeah.
And he was quite sick.
Yes.
And Donald Trump himself got sick. And then India, devastated.
It is.
Brazil, so difficult to say, well, there was lack of solidarity. Timor-Leste, we cannot complain.
Okay.
We have had support from everyone, particularly Australia, the largest number of vaccines and equipment, medical system, test, but other countries in the region. Cambodia sent us also masks, more than 1 million masks. And we had support from China, from New Zealand, from Portugal, Korea, Japan. United States also sent us Pfizer. International partnership, multilaterally, is extremely important. And very important as we see the war going on in Ukraine, Russia, devastating for Ukraine and devastating for Russia and for Europe as a whole. The consequences of interruption of supply of gas to Europe, the sanctions on Russia has effect on oil price going up, that will impact all over the world. So no one is insulated. For us, number one, keep the peace in the country. Timor-Leste is at peace. We have zero political violence. We have zero ethnic-based or religious-based violence that happened in the region. We have exceptionally good relations with all our neighbors, with all the superpowers. We have excellent relationship with China, as we do have excellent relationship with the United States. Friends of everybody, enemies of no one.
I think that's the best way to be, isn't it? Is to be friends and not have any enemies. I think life is a lot easier to live and to run and everything else. Well done. Congratulations to last through the, unfortunately, the worst probably 2 years of many people's lives of COVID. And I think during COVID, it split a lot, but also brought a lot of friendship between a lot of countries with helping each other, and to know that if the worst comes to worst, people will stick together. Okay, so now I'm sure a lot of questions are going to be asked soon about the ASEAN. Now, I think if we finish on this and then we can go to questions. We have the 10 countries and you're hoping to be the 11th country. Why you want to become part of the ASEAN? Now, we do know some other countries, you said, like I said, they automatically joined, like in Africa and whatnot. So this, you kind of have to show that you need to be part of a group and our members. And yes, you're in the restricted. So why is it important, and are you ready to join?
Well, membership in a regional organization is almost instinctively, naturally, the way the world is arranged, is organized in global institutions and regional institutions. Being part of a regional organization facilitate many things. Some are very advanced regional organizations, like the European Union is the most advanced, others less, but ASEAN is a very influential, important trade bloc, economic bloc, community bloc. It has not reached the level of unification of Europe, but maybe they were wise not to have done what Europe has done. Maybe the Europeans have moved too fast with single currency and political union. As it is, I think ASEAN is doing very well. Membership in ASEAN can mean more investors from the ASEAN region and beyond coming to Timor-Leste. Will be part of a market of almost 700 million people with almost $4 trillion joint GDP. It will facilitate Timorese going to study, work across Southeast Asia. It will be give more visibility to Timor-Leste's own voice, in the sense speaking together with ASEAN countries on issues like climate change, on debt relief, or other economic, financial challenges in the world. If we have a consensual voice in ASEAN, and sometimes, who knows, Timor-Leste could be within ASEAN a country that lead in some areas, like right now on climate change. Timor-Leste is a leading voice within the small island developing states, within the LDCs, the least developed countries, in the group of fragile states called G7+. Timor-Leste is an active leader. Joining ASEAN, we can continue to be a strong advocate on climate change, but being member of ASEAN, we will always seek consensus within ASEAN. We will no longer speak on our own. We have to work towards having a common voice. And we can help ASEAN reaching out to other blocs where we are already entrenched, like the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, that from Timor-Leste to Portugal in Europe, to Brazil in South America, many countries in Africa, part of our community. We can help ASEAN countries lobbying, reaching out to the LDCs, the least developed country, which form a formidable bloc in the UN system. So we will bring something to ASEAN, not only benefiting us, but who knows, we can benefit ASEAN as a group.
Okay, excellent. So if you're okay, we can
Yes, please.
open the floor. Okay, so we'll open up for questions with the media. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I'd like to thank you. Previously spoken on the phone, arranged by your wonderful ambassador.
Okay, yes.
After you thank you.
Pleasure.
Do that. I'm from Cambodia Investment Review. My first question is, what key sectors can Cambodian investors help you with in
Well, I believe soon we will have, with joining ASEAN, we will have 5 more ASEAN countries setting up embassies in Timor-Leste. That will facilitate the day-to-day communication and cooperation. With Cambodia's very special affinity with Timor-Leste, with our interest in enhancing trade and economic relations, I would like to see Cambodian business people visiting the country, explore possibilities. What are the possibilities? Tourism, for instance, the tourism sector. We have the richest biodiversity in the world. And this is not a statement from me, it's from Conservation International, plus Australian and American, British scientists who for 3 years, they did survey in the entire region. And they released a report already a few years ago and saying, surprisingly to all of them, Timor-Leste has the richest biodiversity in the world. Until that time, it was a region in Indonesia called Raja Ampat that has something like 280 species. Well, Timor-Leste, almost 600 species. We have the healthiest coral reefs in the world. In Australia, which is very well known, the Great Barrier Reef, very much damaged. 30 kilometers of Great Barrier Reef damaged by bleaching, partly global warming, but partly the sugarcane industry in Queensland that over decades, unleash chemicals into the sea, destroy the Great Barrier Reef. Although it's recovering, the government a few years ago began a massive campaign and surprisingly, apparently it's recovering. We never had dynamite fishing or cyanide fishing. We never had big, massive trolleys, with the net dragging on the corals. So we have the healthier. So that's great for tourism. It's one of the more very popular spot now for tourists, young tourists from China, Singapore, Korea, Australia going to Timor for diving. Very pristine. But we also have minerals onshore, like marble, millions of cubic meters of marble, and other minerals like manganese, and onshore oil, onshore gas, and I mentioned earlier, hopefully soon we can start developing a big gas field called Greater Sunrise, which is 150 kilometers offshore from Timor-Leste, 500 kilometers from Australia. And I hope that the next few months, next year latest, we reach an agreement and develop. And maybe Cambodia can also participate in that as an investor. Because with our own sovereign fund, Timor-Leste, with oil and gas money, we are not just spending, we invested. One, the sovereign fund pay our budget. To put it simply, our national budget, which 100% self-funded, comes from our sovereign fund, from the petroleum fund. But we also invest in U.S. Treasury bonds, in other state bonds like European bonds, Euro bonds, and in equities around the world. Sometimes we make big money. A few years ago, in a matter of 3-4 years, we made $7 billion from our investments. And so we investing our sovereign fund in more than 1,000 equities around the world. Yes, we lost a lot a few weeks ago when the Ukraine war happened. Stock market crashed. But losing the stock market is academic. You lose if you panic and you sell. You hold on, you wait. The market recover, and sometimes you make even more money than before. So maybe Cambodia and other countries will start investing in our, because we are looking for partners to develop the Greater Sunrise. We have some already interested, but not enough.
And you're making this EAC.
Yeah.
What are the plans?
With Indonesia, that's a proposal that came from Indonesia. The two sides working actively, first on the legal framework and economic feasibility study, market study, to develop a big free trade zone, free trade area in a territory that belongs to Timor-Leste, but inside Indonesia, West Timor, called Wekusi. 10 kilometers into Wekusi, 10 into Indonesia, for a big free trade area. But there are other initiatives with Indonesia that are ongoing. Obrigado.
Yes, please.
Mr. President, I'm Mr. Rodriguez Iñasi, the same name.
Same name, namesake, same Jose.
Different times newspaper in Cambodia, but I'm Filipino, and you mentioned President Aquino. I met him several times. So I'm also friends with these people.
Thank you.
And I also talked with you on the phone before we get married together.
Okay.
Ambassador.
Thank you.
My question is just, I have two questions. My first question is, there are rumors that Timor-Leste will become a full-fledged ASEAN member by next year. Are you optimistic that it will be achieved next year? Will become ASEAN member?
I am certain we will become member next year. The time is very auspicious. It would be a great tribute to Cambodia, a great recognition of Cambodia that during Cambodian presidency, before the baton is handed over to Indonesia, an official announcement is made that ASEAN has agreed on the timing of Timor-Leste joining. And ideally, highly symbolic. It would be a tribute to ASEAN if during Indonesian presidency, when we witness the great ritual ceremonial of Timor-Leste joining ASEAN. What a more beautiful example of maturity of countries, post-conflict, normalizing relations, healing the wounds, reconcile, than Indonesia presiding over Timor-Leste membership in ASEAN. And Indonesia has been also one of the first countries to support us joining ASEAN. From day one, when we applied, President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, at the time he was president, he was very forceful in endorsing, advocating in the ASEAN summit in Bali in 2011. But also has been Malaysia, very supportive, starting with Dr. Mahathir. And the Philippines, all the presidents since democracy in the Philippines, and the rest of ASEAN, all of them, there is no exception. During the military rule, even the military rule in Myanmar before, they were already also endorsing Timor-Leste membership. Brunei, so Vietnam, Laos, I think I mentioned all. It will be a tribute to ASEAN leadership, collective leadership that we join.
Do you have another question?
The question is, now it's not that when it's, they're more like Cambodia, they have more treaty agreements with Cambodia and other countries. You have other plans for Timor-Leste to have the same agreements with Cambodia, different agreement?
Free trade agreement with
Free trade.
Cambodia.
Yes, of course, we would like to have free trade agreements with Cambodia, for instance. So, I personally, I'm a strong advocate of free trade agreement. Some classic economies, particularly economies of the left, and I don't underestimate their knowledge, do not agree much or believe that free trade agreements, free trade helps poorer countries, weaker countries. I don't really agree with that. I've been to, I witnessed a free trade zone like in Mexico. I lived many, many years in the United States, traveled across the U.S., and I went to Mexico many times with friends crossing the border. Oh, you go. And I witnessed, I saw by chance, being in the U.S., the debate during the beginning of NAFTA, throughout NAFTA, and while the debate was going on, Mexico's economy was moving, was incredibly changing. So much so that when President Trump came into office, he demanded renegotiation of NAFTA because allegedly Mexico was only gaining from that. The U.S. was losing with NAFTA. So he did force a review and they renegotiated. So it shows that even a weaker country, because NAFTA, Mexico, United States, when you look back at the 70s, 80s, Mexico was not what it is today. So I agree with free trade because, it's really, there is a spillover effect and force our people to work, to innovate, to try to, and we learn with the others. And that's the experience we see it even in our own country today. So I'm not afraid of free trade agreements. We should have with as many countries as possible.
Okay, great. Anyone else have a question? No more questions? Okay, so we'll go back to even to the ASEAN. If for some reason, as you said, you have close relations with most of the Asian countries, if you don't get accepted, will you join another alliance? What would be your step?
Well, it is hypothetical and very negative hypothetical.
Yes.
And,
But,
so negative that I don't think it's going to happen. So there is no alternative for us but joining ASEAN. And joining ASEAN doesn't mean we stop having relations with other countries. No, China remains very important for Timor-Leste with ASEAN or no ASEAN. But so is the United States. Right now, the U.S. is probably, I would say, the biggest development partner of Timor-Leste in terms of amount of commitment. We recently, a few months ago, signed an almost $500 million commitment from the United States for infrastructure, development, education in Timor-Leste. This in addition to the annual USAID budget for Timor-Leste. In addition to defense cooperation we have with the United States, some of the help we have directly from the Pentagon. So we have a special relationship with the United States, as we have with Cuba. The Cuba and the United States have a zero relationship, but we, Timor-Leste, managed to have very good relationship with the two, who don't have a relation with each other. So we have a Cuban medical presence in Timor-Leste, as we have U.S. Navy engineers present in Timor-Leste.
Oh, so like you say, I don't think it'll happen. You've got quite a good backing of the Asian countries who have also put their hand up and said we don't see a reason why it's just taking a little while to, of course, get together. So next month is the big summit. Have you got an invitation? Will you be attending as a guest to come?
Not yet, and I wouldn't be, I say, often in my life, I go to meetings uninvited, and even international meetings. I tried to go to an APEC meeting in Osaka many years ago in the early 90s. The Indonesians found out I was trying to get to the APEC meeting. They sent the Japanese security after me. So I didn't succeed. But for something like that, today Timor-Leste is independent, is sovereign. I'm here as a guest of His Majesty, the King and the Prime Minister. If we are invited, of course, we will be very honored to attend. But I'm not holding my breath to have an invitation for the ASEAN Summit. We have been attending already for many years ASEAN ministerial meetings. We are invited at foreign minister level, and there's some other working groups in education and other technical. We already actively participating for a few years.
Obviously, over the next couple of days, you do have a meeting with the Prime Minister. Will there be talk about the ASEAN joining the ASEAN community? Will you have a friendly chat about this?
Yes, definitely. ASEAN is membership is on the top of the agenda, as it was when we met in New York. Myself and the minister, we met with the Prime Minister in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. We were there, sitting there, when Prime Minister Hun Sen spoke, and he was very kind. He noted our presence in the room, and so inevitably we will talk about the ASEAN membership, but also about the bilateral relationship. I would like to see our two governments, for Timor-Leste and the Cambodian government, agree. First, we will sign the air traffic,
Aviation and
air service agreement. And I would like to see direct flights between Phnom Penh and Dili. Why not? But sometimes governments have to subsidize these flights. It is not realistic to think that you start an air connectivity and on its own the airline or the air link is going to be sustainable. No. It has to be subsidized by the two sides, the two governments, for a period of time until people get used to, they inform, and then you can start easing away from the subsidy. But until then, I don't see any alternative. But because sometimes air links are political links, diplomatic links. It's a bit like you pay for an embassy. You an airline, or even Timor-Leste participating in the Olympic Games, where we always lose, or in the Southeast Asian Games, sometimes we win. Few times. But yeah, this is all part of diplomacy. And an airline link, yeah, this is part of diplomacy. And we can afford to pay for that.
Okay, has anyone got any questions? So with, okay, I'll continue. Then with the ASEAN coming up next month, as we keep saying, do you hope the Prime Minister and the Chairman, Prime Minister Hun Sen, calls a referendum to say, let's do the vote now, and as his last kind of coming into his chairmanship, to put you in and see if we can vote for you?
No, I don't think it's a question of a referendum. There's already consensus agreement among the heads of state. Timor should join. We had 3 missions to Timor-Leste in the last few years, very big mission, each with 60 people or more, covering all 3 pillars of ASEAN. And I haven't seen the report because the report is not for us, the report is for ASEAN leaders.
Okay.
But we have received feedback informally from different people in the ASEAN region that the ASEAN experts were very impressed with Timor-Leste progress. And they recommended to the leaders that the benchmarks have been met and the political decision is now left for the ASEAN leaders to make. And from what we hear, it's already an open secret that Timor-Leste will join.
Basically, yeah.
So there is a consensus in that. And so I think there'll be a big event, historic event sometime next year when Timor-Leste join ASEAN.
So when you officially get told, and hopefully soon, how will you celebrate?
Yeah, it's a good question. A good question. Well, definitely in the host country, obviously in Indonesia, we would organize big event in the host country where attended by all the ASEAN leaders. A big event to showcase Timor-Leste culture, Timor-Leste achievements, to showcase Timor-Leste bilateral relations with different ASEAN countries in some very dynamic movie, video. But also back in Timor-Leste, there will be a celebration. We, Timor-Leste, we always enjoy parties. We are the country in the world with more holidays. So if someone suggests, let's have an ASEAN day, and that day is a holiday, everybody agrees. So we'll have it's on the 8th of, 8th of August. Huh? 8th of August, the ASEAN Day. So I'm sure next year ASEAN Day will be a holiday in Timor-Leste. We don't agree much in the parliament, but when it comes to holidays, everybody agrees.
Kind of almost an excuse to enjoy life and everything else. Mr. President, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
It's
you.
been an honour. And once again, welcome to Cambodia, the Kingdom of Wonder. And over the next few days, I'm sure you'll be very busy and meet some lovely people and distinguished guests, obviously with the King and the Prime Minister and Humanet. So enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you.
I will extend the invitation to come next month because I'll be here. So you're most welcome to come.
Thank you.
Invitation on behalf of myself. And I'm sure everyone else would like to say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was the press conference with the President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, President Jose Manuel Ramos Horta, and with our very own EAC News reporter, Anthony Ellis, who was the moderator of the press conference. The president arrived this morning close to 10 a.m. this Wednesday morning, along with a high-level delegation for the three-day official state visit to Cambodia. And according to a press release issued by the Cambodian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the president of Timor-Leste will pay a state visit to Cambodia at the invitation of His Majesty the King of Cambodia. Tomorrow he will have a full day of agenda from visiting the King at the Royal Palace, the Independence Monument, and the statue of the former King of Cambodia. He will also meet with the President of the Senate, the President of the National Assembly, and the President of and the Prime Minister as well. As you can see, EAC News reporter Anthony Ellis was shaking hands with the president and taking pictures with him. And we will keep you up to date with all the news regarding the president of the Timor-Leste. And you will just stay tuned in with us at EAC News and our website as well at eacnews.asia. So thank you so much for joining us here at EAC News. See you next time.